All right, welcome everybody. It's we're running late. We're having connectivity broadband issues. We got the right guest speaker for that today, thank God. It is Wednesday, August 17th, and I'm a few weeks away from going crazy about Digital 360 Summit. Tell you more in a minute. I see that we have quite a bit of folks joining, so before we get going, Dr. John Sibley Butler, how about some music?
I'm going down to the Greyhound station. I'm gonna get a ticket to ride. I'm gonna find that lady with 2 or 3 kids and sit down by her side. Ride till the sun comes up and down, round about 2 or 3 times. Smoke a cigarette on the back seat. Try out the songs on the people I meet and get along with it all. Where the people say y'all, sing a song with a friend, change the shape I'm in, and start singing again.
Woo! Very nice, very nice. John Butler, how are you, sir?
Well, I'm doing good. You know, as we try to keep everything going here, we have a new CEO of ERCOT here in the great state of Texas now.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting to see how for the first time really in my lifetime, how the interaction between electricity and temperature and where we are really makes a difference, you know, for the first time. So it was all in the paper before the whiteout. Nobody knew what ERCOT was. As I said before, people thought it was something that you put in the refrigerator. And you look at what's going on in the world, it's still a big mess in the world. And of course, we have turned in that big mess also, you know, in America with our political stuff. But the economy stuff, if you look at the supply chains, they're trying to come back in a lot of ways. And I've been involved in helping to bring the supply chain back to America, especially with the EV stuff, working with some companies on that. And then, of course, we have back to school. And then we have the big change in no mask. So with everybody being all vaccinated and et cetera, you know, our war on the virus is a little different than the war in Europe. But now it's interesting to see how all of a sudden there's no expectations. The only expectation is to use your own judgment and protect yourself. So Andre, the world is interesting. There's a lot of innovation going on. Lots of innovation. We've got to make sure that, and as we have distributed workplace, that the broadband is there, because all of a sudden you don't have the big building anymore. If companies choose not to work in the big building, every office is now someone's home. Yeah. And you got to make sure that the productivity of the companies are continued as we move to a diversified, distributed workforce in America, or hybrid type. So that's kind of what's going on in my world.
Yeah, absolutely. Llewellyn King, how are you, sir?
I'm fine, except somewhat challenged by computers. They don't like me, you know. There's a word out there, there's a virus, which is Get King on computers. It's because in the early days of computers, I stood up for the mechanical typewriter as being a superior instrument, which it is, by the way. And ever since then, these inanimate objects have shown a surprising capacity. Malice.
Let me guess. You're running a PC that is running Windows.
Yes, but I bought the one you told me to buy. We bought 2 of them, and and we haven't been able to work them at all. So you owe us a couple of grand. Probably.
Well, I'm going to challenge that. As an ex-pilot, I think you just have not taken the time to learn. Anybody who could fly an airplane, if you could crash, you could learn about a computer. So I do not buy that. What I do accept is you have not taken the time to do that, and that does not sit well with John Sibley Butler.
John Sibley Butler. You must know Sibley comes in. Is that some kind of signal to a foreign power?
Certainement. Je parle beaucoup le français parce que ma grand-mère est français.
Anyway, I am busy looking at the extraordinary impact we're likely to see in the electric business from the IRA, which was signed into law yesterday. there is a huge amount of money which is going to profoundly affect the whole electric world, but especially rural electric cooperatives and public power entities. The inclusion of these not-for-profit companies in the tax system, in that they can get production tax credits and other tax credits, is going to be huge. They're going to get the money by direct pay, so that if a utility spends a not-for-profit utility, and there are basically close to 3,000 of them, spends $100 million, it will get back from the government $30 million. That is huge money, and it's going to change a lot of things. We're going to see more pure transmission companies on the rural electric side getting into generation. We're going to see a huge push for better transmission. And some of this, of course, also applies to the investor owned. There's a lot of money, a lot of intention, and we've got to wait till the Treasury produces some kind of guidance, which it has to do it within 180 days, according to the statute. And we're off to the races. The problems are the problems that John mentioned: supply chain, labor shortages, and of course, always with electric utility and transmission, not in my backyard. But
Yeah.
we are moving. It is now generally recognized that we're going to need at least as much generation as we have if we're going to electrify the surface transportation system. And we do not have at the moment any plans to double the electric output in 30 years, which is going to be very challenging, very interesting. It's probably going to see a revival of nuclear, and at least we're going to see the deployment of a lot of experimental small reactors, some of which will no doubt become permanent features of the generating landscape.
Agreed. Let me say hello to our guest speaker, Brian Schneider. How are you, sir?
I'm good. How are y'all? I have to say the first few minutes of this show was extremely entertaining, both before people joined and when everybody joined. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely. We one of the things that is key about what we're going to get into discussing many things about is that there's Washington, D.C. and many people at the leadership of this country still do not have the connection that the power grid of the future, the economy of the future requires broadband everywhere. And that is exactly what Brian drives. So before we get rolling into this conversation, Brian, and you tell us about your company and all these things, let me introduce you really quick for those that are listening and don't know you. You are the CEO of Lit Communities, and you're going to be with us for this hour. Lit Community is a service in, what I would call a fiber internet service provider, offering broadband solutions for cities and communities wanting to accelerate the use of smart technologies. And, prior to Lit, you were a network design practice area leader at the Foresight Group, director of fiber delivery at Byers Engineering Company, project manager at TrueNet Communications, and started pretty much your career at AFL, which is a great company that utilities use quite a bit, as a drafter, F2 conditioning designer, and a senior engineer. Basically somebody who has gone all the way through the ladder of the steps and now is an entrepreneur, John Butler, and he is looking for the American dream and that IPO. So Brian holds a degree in business administration and management from Troy University and a degree in drafting and design technology from ITT Technical Institute in Bessemer. Welcome, Brian Snider.
Thank you. And actually, so my true entrepreneurial started when I started my career trying to play golf professionally.
Oh, wow.
And so, as you can see, that did not work out. It was for health reasons, though, not for this at all.
Right.
But I've I'm now enjoying that probably at a completely different level at Lit right now. It feels like we're, on a rocket ship trying to hold on. It's exciting to see what's happening. I think the strange part is with Lit, we shouldn't even be a company. What we do shouldn't be needed in this country right now. And I felt like, and our team felt like it had to be done by somebody because it was being overlooked. And my entire career, I worked as a contractor, as you heard, with all the different companies I was with. I was always working as a contractor for doing large volume AT&T projects, Google Fiber. We built in Austin, San Antonio, Salt Lake City, worked with Huntsville Utilities where they built the network and then leased to Google Fiber. We've seen a lot of different models built. We worked with Verizon's 5G densification projects in Cleveland, Seattle, San Francisco, Knoxville, and Nashville. So tying that all together, once Google went from Kansas City to Austin, it was like you could see everybody react. You could see all the big providers react. And this is something we should have been doing before, but they all went to the large cities. They all went to the tier 1 NFL cities. And that's actually where they started building not only fiber to the home, but their backhaul services for all their wireless technologies that were going to be coming out as well, and support for 5G and smart applications. And the big piece that I saw is nobody was looking at the tier 2 cities and beyond. And this was 8 years ago, actually, when the idea of Lit started. We were created in 2019, but the idea and how we could accomplish it took years. We had to take a process and figure out ways for where areas might not make sense financially. How could we do a different business plan to make it make sense?
Right.
And working with the community and creating P3 partnerships in unique models is what got us to that point. And I'm in Medina County, Ohio today. It's our first market because when we started Lit Communities in April of 2019, we had already been consulting with different municipalities across the country, and Medina County had been looking for a fiber to the home partner for years. And we actually met them through the Verizon project, and they already have an open access middle mile network throughout the county. And then we're attaching it, building fiber to the home as a local ISP called Medina Fiber. And I'm sitting in our demo center right now where we bring everything local. It is a local ISP, so it looks like a community network regardless of how the funding comes in. Yeah. And then we'll build workforce development. But the big piece is the exciting part that we all want to talk about right now is the autonomous vehicles and all the cool stuff we can do. We want to be the Jetsons, but until we have connectivity, we can't. Mm-hmm. And
that's right.
That's where I want to get to. And we have to have infrastructure to be able to do it. And we're building that I'd say in a different way than a lot of incumbents or other ISPs are doing it. Our focus is on building a complete smart city for that community. I'm sorry, I'm rambling a little bit, but I think the definition of smart city is it's different for everybody, right? Mm-hmm. And in my mind, it doesn't matter if it's Brownsville, Texas, if it's Medina County, Ohio, if it's York County, Pennsylvania, which is all markets we're going to be working in. All of those markets are going to be different, and they're going to have different smart city needs. Mm-hmm. So what York does to be smart compared to what Brownsville does to be smart is two different things. So the cities and the municipalities have to come up with their own definition of what they want for a smart city. And then let's create a roadmap to do it. And it's a 10-year roadmap. It's nothing that's going to happen in a year. And it's been fun getting to this point. It's about the journey. And now I'm excited to see where we can take this connectivity, though.
Absolutely.
Okay. So Brian, this is
right, Johnny.
Yes, an operational definition. And let me say, I have been caught in live golf. I have an 8 handicap, so I can get on the live tour, and they said they would pay me $3 million not to call them anymore. So I'm feeling pretty good. Let me ask this, Brian. So what I see is then you get with city councils and cities and regions to create a business plan for them to go broadband and do great things. So I have two basic questions there. One is, what is your perception of the city councils who run the city when you talk about broadband? And the other is, where are we in terms of getting broadband in the rural communities of America as we look at distributive kinds of workplaces. So when you go into a smaller market, as you would say, to do a business plan, where everything has been good for 100 years, why do they need you?
Mhm.
So what's your reaction when you talk to the city council and funding about this new opportunity for their community?
I would, if you asked me that question 5 years ago, I would give you a totally different answer. But back then when we were starting out, one of the big things that we were analyzing across the country is the groups or the organizations that were going to be in the best position to go into rural areas were electric co-ops. You know, they know how to do it. They know how to run a utility. They've been doing it for years. It's very similar to electrifying the country back, you know, when FDR put everything in place. So from that standpoint, with our experience and what the process that we built in place, it was the municipalities that didn't have that. It was the municipalities that needed to, you know, they don't know what they don't know. And so it was an education process for those council representatives, for the mayor, for a city manager. It starts out as more of an educational process for them. And that's how we do start things with our assessments when we work with municipalities is, and once we kind of describe our process, I guess the community starts listening, because once we first come into a rural area, they're always skeptical, because no, we can't do it. It's going to be the first thing a lot of folks say, because the money isn't going to make sense. Well, we have a phrase that we always say, it's always feasible. We don't believe in feasibility studies. We believe in making a business plan, and then it's about going and executing it. So when we go, and to answer your question, we go in detail about what they can do with this from an economic development standpoint, and they have to look beyond internet they should already have from the standpoint, right? It's what can you do with it? And municipalities' ears start perking up when you talk about the businesses that you can bring in, the economic development that you can bring in, you change different things from, like we were talking about, from smart city applications to where you're changing a downtown area that historically gets congested with traffic to all of a sudden it could be a walking downtown area. And even that's smart, but you're actually taking it back a little bit old school in a sense from that side of things. So it's really an educational process, and then we work very systematically through our business, through our what we call our community assessment process, to where we give that municipality a business plan. We feel like we can walk away and they can take it and still build out a network and connect everybody in their community.
This is very interesting to me, because what we need to do in all cities is this idea of get the population conscious about the business models and the money they can make around broadband. The technology is one thing, but as Andreas would tell you, always ask, okay, we have the technology, how can I make money with it? So I think it'll be significant for the entire country as we move forward.
Yeah. Llewellyn?
Yes, very interesting. I wonder if you realize how much money there is in this IRA bill for broadband, and particularly I think most of it is going to be channeled through rural electric cooperatives, and most of it I think will be coming from the Department of Agriculture, and there's a lot of it. It is a final attempt to really close out the provision of broadband to rural areas. But you say this is not likely to affect municipalities and other smaller public entities that are behind the power curve now. So the question I wonder is, what do you do to kickstart those if this bill doesn't do it? And secondly, who pays you? Is it the benefiting entity? Is it the company operating the broadband, or the government? Where do you get your money? How do you make your money?
Yeah, actually, those are
keen interest to John Sibley Butler.
those are great questions. They really cut to the heart of what municipalities need to know. It's how much is it going to cost? How much money could I make in a business model? And I don't want to be the ISP. You know, those are one of the things that we hear. So we have to, and we understand that. So that's where open access comes into play in different models and things like that. When we started Lit, it was before COVID, and a year later, COVID started. Our model going into it, we always felt like the municipality should either own a part of the network or receive revenue from the network. If they own a part of the network, they qualify for more grants and for other funding and things like that. But most of the time back in 2019, we didn't have the money that's starting to become available now. So we thought our business model was we would work with 5 municipalities and one might move forward because they would have to vote to raise bonds to go build it out. And yeah, they might be able to apply for a grant depending on where they live, but or where the city's at. And I guess our mindset was, yes, we have an entire grant services team that works a part of us. Renee, one of our founders, our chief strategy officer, that's been most of his career before he got into focusing on broadband grants, his infrastructure grants, was his entire career. But we also have the mindset that we're never going to win those. If we go in with the mindset that we're going to get that, we could be sitting having the same conversation next year about the same municipality. We haven't moved anywhere. So that's where we had to start thinking outside the box. And we had to raise private capital to offset it, but private capital obviously looks at things a lot different. Where a municipality, if they were just raising bonds, they might not necessarily be wanting to make a certain profit. They want to just get their money back and provide a utility to their citizens and residents. You know, from our side, we're a for-profit company. We need to make money as well too. But I think that's where we're different from others, is where let's make a business model where the municipality can make money and we can make money, and then they can reinvest their money back into the municipality. We can too, because we're going to build additional revenue streams. But as long as we both are very transparent in how we work together, we could make it happen. So when we were first going into this, then COVID happened, right? That's changed everything. With CARES Act money first, we were able to, different municipalities were able to spend money. Even in a short period of time, we were able to build fiber in York County, Pennsylvania, because they use existing conduit, and then in Botetourt County, Virginia, just because we were in position in those markets to go fast. And now ARPA funds is started off to where now you see municipalities building, they have the money to go build out the middle mile network that gets you to a rural community. Once you're to the rural community, then the scenario can be, okay, now it's financially feasible for a private company like ourselves to attach to that network and then build out. So that's where now we work with 5 municipalities, and all 5 of them are moving forward because they have the funds to be able to put this in their hands to start off at first. And then we simply complete what they can't do. When we started in 2019, to answer where our funding came from, we were trying to raise money for just Medina Fiber at first to just try to prove our model. That was difficult. And when COVID hit, that changed some things to where we had to raise money at the LIP level, but we closed financing the first of last year with Stevens Capital Management out of Little Rock, Arkansas, and the Pritzker organization out of Chicago, who both have invested in other ISPs, Point Broadband, Hargray, Clearwave Fiber up in Illinois. They saw our model, they saw how unique it is with creating the partnerships, the community goodwill. So we're able to bring the private capital to where, like in Brownsville, for example, they're bringing $20 million roughly of ARPA funds to build out a middle mile across the whole city, where we're bringing in $70 million to complete the fiber to the home under a local ISP called BTX Fiber. So in that sense, we don't need any grant money. That's great, okay? Every market's not going to be like that. We're in some markets that are extremely rural where we still can't get the cost low enough for private capital to work. And that's the areas that I'm awake up at night trying to figure out, how can we do this? And some of it is going to be these grant monies that you were mentioning that are coming out. My concern is who's reviewing it and is it going to be awarded the right way? We've seen in the past, now the recent RDOF kind of pullbacks from some of the wireless companies, I think was actually a good precedent for what they're going to be analyzing things a little bit better. So we're not getting just the bare minimum. We're getting what the future is going to need for proper connectivity and proper technology advancement. But saying all that, like the Infrastructure Jobs Act, honestly, it's written for our business model. There's 42 billion, I think, going to middle mile networks that the municipalities can build. And they can, just because their state, they might not be able to be an ISP provider. They can be open access dark fiber and let us, a private company, partner with them and then we're providing the service, and the municipality is still making revenue off of leasing dark fiber. So they're not providing any service. They're just providing the private entity the ability to make it cost effective to justify building in a more rural area.
Yeah. One thing that I was interested in, you had mentioned I call it the operational definition of the smart city. Every operational definition will be different, but the standardization has to do with the technology. So while they might have a different operation of what a smart city is, that is what they would like to do, whether it's going back to the 1880s or whatever. So the standardization for them to hook up. So let's think about cities and rural cities as being on a platform. So let's forget about the dirt, let's forget about the pavement and et cetera. So let us say that I am in Franklinton, Louisiana, which is just north of New Orleans, which is my hometown, by the way, where I was raised. And let's say all of a sudden I'm sitting on a platform and I need to interact with the platform in Dallas, or I need to interact with the platform in New Orleans. How do you see the business model going across platforms? No longer am I just rural, as in the old electrification of the farm. All of a sudden I could be in Tokyo. All of a sudden I could be in Dallas. All of a sudden. So how do you see that? Do you put that into your business models when you talk to cities themselves about really putting everything on a platform so it's interactive? You can plug and play the different kinds of business models.
Yeah, and it's a good question. And it's actually it's a challenge, I think, with technology in the industry to be able. I've heard companies say, "Oh, we have a platform where every smart city application can run on top of it." I'll believe it when I see it. From that standpoint, because there's so many different smart technologies out there. So from that standpoint, I think we're going to have to crawl, walk, run, and sprint in building those platforms that way. Like, for example, we look at like open access networks a little bit differently, where we call them like open application networks, to where it's not as much changing ISPs for competition now. It's being able to choose, I want to use this smart home provider instead of this smart home provider. We want to create first like a marketplace for residents to where they can choose all kinds of different services, because we offer it on our app store for your home. Let's say we call it our lit marketplace for our customers. But we have to add telehealth to it first. Then we'll add multiple telehealth options. Then we'll add smart home options. Then we'll add multiple smart home options. We'll partner with direct TV streaming, but we'll also have My Bundle TV that can educate on different streaming platforms and things like that too. Okay, now we've got a platform that's for the home. Okay, how can we then do that for smart applications and different communications and ways we haven't even thought of, where we're having meetings completely virtual and you're a hologram, and all those cool things that we see on commercials that we can't do yet. It looks great, but we will be able to soon. That gets created then and this is, I guess, maybe a little bit more of my opinion. I just see wireless actually being more of an open access play in the future, to where if you have a single owner of the vertical asset, being able to leverage that vertical asset for different, who knows, you could be leasing different to each tower that you access to Ford or to Tesla. And that way they have, latency to where autonomous vehicles can work. And then not only now do I have communication from a hardwired infrastructure level, I have it from a wireless level too. And that's why I think we're not to that point yet to where we have a platform, I feel like, that's all encompassing for smart cities. I don't know if we ever will, to really answer that question, because the issue is we have more applications that coming out than we have connectivity to use them, one, or the ability to keep up with the platforms to be able to put that on there. So that is going to be an issue with cities, I think, in the future, is how do I take all these different services and organize them to still be efficient? And am I spending so much money I'm not efficient? So, it might be bright and shiny, but once you get into looking at it a little bit more, it's still a turd.
Let me ask one more question. What's the pushback on being an internet service provider for the rural areas?
Some states they just can't be.
They just can't be. They don't have my question is, do they have to in the future? That's my question, given that.
I see, it's just like the electric co-ops that, got created and things like that, to where electric co-ops are now being internet service providers. It's another stream of revenue. I think you're going to see rural areas realize this can be an additional stream of revenue for them. The problem is they don't have the technical capabilities to do it.
Yeah.
But we're going to have to create educational programs that's going to teach them the technical capabilities to do that. Like the whole workforce development for what we're creating, we have an internal training program that we focus on, that we want to bring to where you can learn how to design a fiber network, to where you can learn how to install it, to where you can learn how to, you're splicing it, because we're going to need those jobs. And I think that's one thing that's missing in addition to materials and supply chain concerns. It's going to be complete lack of workforce that knows how to do this with the amount of billions and billions of dollars that are coming out. And so in some of those aspects, I'm a little worried about that too.
Yeah.
Give us some cities, give us some examples. I think you mentioned York, Pennsylvania. That was one name that you mentioned. Are there some others? Who's done it right? What are the promising cities? What are the model cities to be pointed to? That is the way to do it. Do it the way that Salem somewhere has done it right. Say.
Yeah, that's a good question, because I think there's a lot of different markets that you can look at that have all done different business models and I don't think any of them are right or wrong necessarily. It's just what that municipality or partner decided to do. Utopia out in Utah, I think they struggled when they first got started, but what they're doing now is incredible. Their open access network and how they're building across the whole state of Utah, and they're expanding into other areas. I think they're going to be helping out a lot in California with, California basically really promoting open access networks. I think they're doing it right they're looking out from the consumer's interest more than anything. They're not looking at it from the dollars and cents side. They're looking at it from how much can I save that resident by bringing multiple providers onto the network. So kudos to Utopia for everything they've done. Ammon, Idaho, small town, open access network though, that they did through very unique financing and met the needs of their residents. Some of the other areas, NOAANet out in Washington State, statewide open access network that goes, because of what they've done, the PUDs out there can't provide service. So their public utility districts are creating open access networks that works with NOAANet to be able to build off of that. So go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I beg your pardon. I wanted to build on something Johnny asked you, and that was what's the reluctance to take on the ISP function? Wouldn't the large technology companies or the large communications companies want to have a foothold there and become ISP, even in places where it may not be very lucrative today?
But most cities don't want to be the ISPs. Just they don't want to get in that private competitive. That's what they look at with the incumbents and things like that. And from that scenario, I do think, like I was mentioning earlier, I think some of these networks that are being built right now will be sold back to the municipalities when laws do change and they can be the service provider. But once they see the business model fully work, because this isn't something you're going and building a building and it's done after a couple of months. These are years that'll take to get in the process. And then once the municipalities see it, I think a little bit differently, they'll have a different thought process of it. But honestly, most of them it's just straight up, they don't want to get involved in it. They don't want to get involved in even the politics that happen with it, with some of the lobbying efforts and things like that. And you're seeing it like crazy right now. And it's like you're having large, I'm not going to say who they are. I guess I could, but
Johnny's free.
I mean, real quick, Llewellyn, you all know this and you all listening. I mean, it's an issue of density, right? And so we are just like we are in a significant transition of digitalization, decentralization, and decarbonization. Don't be blinded by the reality that the old business model of making money in telecom was about voice access, not about data. The single largest data company out there that makes a ton of money, which is $17 billion a quarter in revenues, is Netflix. It's streaming video. If you don't have broadband, you can't have Netflix. So the world is shifting from an analog world that our friend Llewellyn King loves very much to a digital world that I propose needs to be embraced. And when that change happens and all the things that we do on analog move to the broadband network, then the monetization of what that network is beyond a transport layer emerge. And this is where John is trying to figure it out. Where are the inflection points for that to emerge at scale so that the rural America, low density, reality economy, little company, little factory, furniture store is now a global player potentially with shipping with Amazon and FedEx, right? And so what's your take, Brian, on that transformation journey? There are 40,000 communities in America. There are not NFL cities.
Yeah, and that goes back to you have to look outside the box. It's just like, because of what Medina County did here with their middle mile network, like we're able to financially justify going to a 500 town village just as much as we can justify going to a 14,000 home city within the county. And the costs aren't that much difference when you look at it. But I have to have connection there. And that's the hardest part for these, for a lot of private or smaller ISPs, is I don't have the fiber to the rural area to even start. And then if I have to pay get fiber out there, well, my business plan's already shot. Right. So you are starting to see a lot of electric departments, they're building more fiber for them. So they're like, hey, why don't I partner with you and I'll lease you fiber because I'm going to that rural area anyways. Right. And for example, Lampasas, Texas was an area we worked with years ago when we first started trying this. And their big issue was they had one AT&T fiber cable coming into their town that was cut almost 12 times a year, and they would lose everything. Mm-hmm. And so we created a partnership with LCRA, Lower
Colorado River.
Sorry. And they were bringing fiber to the north and south side of Lampasas for their substations. And we basically created an agreement where if Lampasas paid to use those fibers, would they bring it up in their build plan? And they did. And now Lampasas is partnered with NextLink to be the ISP partner. So even though that took, it took 6 years to get to that point, but Lampasas is going to have better internet connectivity than some parts of New Orleans. It's crazy when you think about some of that.
Right. Well, what I'm hearing here is the old newspaper model. There's a saying among the academicians that if anything that's digital will be free, and therefore the business model will be based on advertising. And that is the old newspaper model. That is, we're going to give the newspaper away and let you read it for free or for nothing, and we're going to make the money on advertising. So do I hear, Andreas, you're saying that the relationship between density and the business model, and the fact that Netflix can make so much money, they get their revenue from advertising. So therefore, they sell the data that we have. So if we can conclude, then we're going back to the old newspaper business model, and let's give everything free. If it's digital, it's free. Lord, if you're a musician, you know that it's going to be free. And therefore, all of the revenue comes from advertising. And so my question is, you think the advertising model will continue to be viable? You think it will change? Because it looks like we're going to give everything free. We're going to have open innovation, open Wi-Fi, and then we're going to take the data to bring in the revenue. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I'd like to add to that. I would like to not use advertisement as much as humanly possible. And I think the way we do that and the way we've built it into our business model is, it's like the studies that are out there were saying, like, there's gonna be 600 devices in your home connected in a certain time period, right? So every single one of those devices have to work off of something. And so there's some type of app, some type of service that's going to be riding over the internet to provide that. I see internet service providers or rural communities making wholesale fees off of those services. So let's say I create a partnership with a telehealth company. So the telehealth company will specifically, and I guess this is advertising and marketing, but for the service, not on, they're paying to put it on our page.
Right.
They're saying, okay, for telehealth, we'll charge X dollars, but for every customer that signs on the network, we get a wholesale fee for managing it through our platform to where that increases our revenue. So that's where, okay, that's when it then turns into the question too, which is how then can we make revenue off the smart city applications, even in the rural area too? And you keep adding those revenue streams, all of a sudden, even if it's an extra $5 per home that you're adding, that boosts that ARPU up for your private equity group, to where now I can get a little bit further, my density can get a little bit worse in a sense and still make it work. So I think you will see, though, to answer your question completely, I think you will see some technology companies and some internet service providers, some smart city even providers actually, leverage advertising in certain aspects. I mean, obviously, like smart bus station stops, advertising, they're going to almost pay for those because you're going to have it digitally enhanced where you can touch a map and, it's going to be recommending a restaurant to go to in that area. Well, does somebody pay for advertising to where their restaurant pops up faster than the one right next door? Depends on how the city sets it up and whether they're going to accept that type of thing. So it will happen, yes.
Yeah, our research shows the research that we do at CMG and then at Texas State is really driven by companies wanting to learn and figure out the future. And our research shows, Johnny, that it's going to be primarily the financial institutions, the underwriters, the insurance companies, the people who are interested in managing the assets that they lend money for to be created, homes, buildings, cars, roads, bridges, all this stuff. And when those assets cross over to leverage the broadband, the connectivity, and with sensors, then the way you maintain that asset, review that asset, make sure that asset is still viable in the depreciable schedule. It's really critical and that's going to reduce dramatically what those companies pay to do that today in an analog world. It'll cost pennies on the dollar. So all those savings will be then, paying for the fees of the additional, sharing of the data and capturing the data, massaging the data that will be riding on top of the transport layers. And so again, we are just starting to see this transformation of everything becoming a 1 and a 0. It's kind of hard to see it. The biggest example that I can give you, and you need to come to Digital 360 to see this keynote, is how crypto mining is becoming the very first most viable global business that is 100% ones and zeros driving energy. There are no humans involved. It's all, little servers in a room, no air conditioning required. Those crypto mining companies can follow the availability of power. If the grid needs to shut down, they shut down. If the grid is available, they're available. How they create the commodity had nothing to do with you and me and our convenience or needing to go to dinner or whatever. These robots work 24/7, 365, optimized to the grid capability. And that's really the beginning of what we're seeing. And what's needed is we need lit communities to become a $300 billion company, energizing 20,000 towns in America right away. Because if we don't do this aggressively on the broadband side, we're going to fall behind to China, Japan, Korea, and everybody else.
Yeah, I think so. If you look at, I think we're catching up. We're trying to stay even now. If you look at that kind of research, I agree. And again, as these business models come in, the big question is how does it benefit that community itself? So what you're saying is that you're going to, the whole idea of scaling things, of course, would make the price of things go down. So therefore, if I'm in Bentonville, Texas, then Brian has to explain that model to the rural communities, and then they become an entity within themselves in the future.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go back to the business of the entity, the municipality or the local government. Brian, you said that they could be hostile. They didn't want the responsibility of managing the system. But if they're going to be smart cities, they're going to have to manage these systems, and they're going to have to encourage these systems. Otherwise, they're going to be left out altogether. They're not going to be functioning in a competitive world. Nobody with any, no professionals will want to locate there if they don't have broadband, because professionals nowadays cannot operate without broadband, including doctors.
So before Brian answers that, let me give you an example on the power grid. That's a myth, Llewellyn. Long Island Power Authority services roughly 6 million New Yorkers. Long Island Power Authority in New York is only a billing entity. National Grid, company headquartered in White Plains, New York, out of the UK, is actually the grid operator. They install the equipment, manage the grid, deliver the electricity, do the fixing of the grid and the storms. And however, Long Island Power Authority is the one that bills the customer and pays and transacts with the customer. But nobody in Long Island Power Authority knows how to run the grid, build the grid, or manage the grid. They outsource the whole thing to somebody else.
So that's what you're going to see with cities. They're going to outsource the smarting of their own operations.
I think so. What do you think, Brian?
Yeah, I agree, because managing a dark fiber network and managing a lit network with ISPs, providing full service is a totally different staff and management system. And you can be pretty lean and actually contract everything out and still manage a dark fiber network pretty efficiently. And that's why, it's again, most of the time it's like we have to add something else to our city to work on right now, and we've got to work on all the other stuff too. So they want to contract this out, and that's where we're like we're their guide to all that. Because before we even started this process, we spent a year just making sure we had all the right partners that would help work with us at the table, from construction partners to Calix from electronics to DXTEL, who we use for marketing. This takes an entire team. It's not just us doing this. And yeah, so the municipalities focus on that more. Now the municipalities that consider providing their own service, from that, we encourage it. If they want to go do it, awesome. And we'll help them get the staff in place. They might contract it out first and then bring them in-house, but we'll work on setting that up for them so they're not in it alone.
Right.
So Llewellyn was concerned in one of his excellent essays about talking to someone and hearing a voice. Now he'll be concerned about seeing a person as he go to the facility, because it looks like, and seeing a person and not seeing a person as the airplane flies around, and not seeing a person when he gets on the train at the Dallas airport, which also is autonomous. So Llewellyn would ask, what will people do?
So actually, I that's a good question, even from what we're dealing with, because it's like you're taking an area that.
Obviously, Johnny thinks of me as the Long Island Power Authority.
You're not?
You're everything. You're my everything. You're my everything.
Handling my thinking for me. Thank you.
Yes, he has outsourced his thinking to me.
Go ahead, Brian. Go ahead,
I like
Brian.
that. I need to outsource my thinking to other people as well. So Johnny, let's talk about that afterwards. Now I forget what we were talking about.
We're talking about outsourcing. Where will people work? I asked where will people work. Yeah.
Oh, from that scenario. Okay. Like I said, we're dealing with that. Well, it's education about what's going on, because you're going from, you got folks that are going from like a 10-1 connection all of a sudden to 100 to a gig.
Mhm.
And so it's like you're having folks that are just struggling cutting the cord from cable TV. You're having folks that are struggling to learn how to pay their bill online because they're used to paying checks for everything. I mean, so it's an educational process to where those and the people that are working at the train station right now, their jobs aren't going to go away. They're just going to have to be re-educated to do different types of jobs, to where they might be working multiple train stations across the country because they're all able to do it remotely because they're connected to all of them now.
Right.
And so I don't think the people are going away necessarily. It's just going to have to be a total re-education process. And that's where, like, even typical universities aren't going to be able to teach some of the technology on the job training that's going to have to actually occur.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right.
I'll give you, again, one data point, and I know we're coming to an end here, but I'll give you a data point of the success story of Austin Energy that is still nobody, we wrote several use cases on the technology transformation that I drove there from 2003 to 2010, but a lot of people are still not paying attention. Austin Energy is a great example of a company that is driving and riding this digital transformation. And I'll make a simple point. When I joined Austin Energy in 2003, we had $700 million of annual revenues and 2,400 employees. Today, the company has $1.7 billion in revenues and 1,700 employees. Through the automation of everything, the company has been able to have less people do the job and double the size of the revenues of the company. While increasing quality, reducing the cost per transaction for the employees and the customers. That's what we're witnessing. Digitalization of everything that we're looking at, industrial digitalization, will become a world of more abundance, more convenient, higher quality for lesser price, and more pervasive everywhere. That's what we're witnessing. And the key building block is broadband. So Brian, real quick, we got 3 minutes left. So tell us about why are Medina and York and Brownsville doing what they're doing? What is the commonality when you look at those leaders? Why are they embracing this? What is exciting about them and what is common on them?
So I say the common denominator in all of them is they do think of this from an economic development standpoint and not just we're getting folks better internet connectivity. They're thinking bigger than just internet, and it has to start that way. And then all of them they're not afraid to say yes. They're not afraid to say, let's try it. I think that speaks volumes of them for going out there and saying, we don't care what some of these other folks are telling us to do. We believe in our business plan that we created with our partners, and we're going to go forward and we're going to show them that we did it the right way. But there's numbers like I can just the amount of businesses that came in just on Medina County's middle mile network was crazy. And then if you think about now, multiply that when you get fiber to the home across the whole county, it's going to be astronomical. And I can't wait to start looking at those data. But it's like we're talking about getting 10 gig to Brownsville, Texas, and Brownsville was ranked the least connected city with a population over 100,000 people for 4 years, but they put their foot down and they said, we're going to drive this forward. I'm just happy we're a part of it, to be honest with you. And York County is the same way. They're building their network first, and then we're just providing our services off of it, the way I look at it. They are providing the conduit for us to happen. But I think the biggest point in all of those is they look at it from an economic development standpoint, and not just that they're putting fiber in the ground. It's not the cable, it's not the data, it's what you can change your entire community around. And I'm proud of what Brownsville's doing. I'm proud of what York's doing, regardless of if we're involved or not. There's other, I'm going to butcher the county's name. I'm sorry. Monongahela, West Virginia, Mon County, West Virginia is the definition of the differences we have in America. They've got Morgantown, West Virginia, with college town, great density. They have the most rural parts of the country you could ever imagine on the western side. Okay, so the county is like, we have $11 million in ARPA. Let's go show how we can do it on the western side, prove our point, and then we can go to the state and say, you have no reason not to give us money at this point, type thing. And then from our side too, okay, it's rural, but if we're seeing 80% take rate, 90% take rate, who cares about the cost at that point? If everybody signs up for it, the cost will justify itself.
Right.
So I know that's long-winded, and I know we're coming to an end, I'm sorry, but they weren't afraid to say yes, and they were focusing on it from an economic development standpoint.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Give me a sense real quick. I see a big correlation. Timing is everything in life. With you starting the company in 2019, but 5G, 6G coming, this acceleration of wireless and the need for fiber. Does this help you? Does this help make the case in rural America or not? Is 5G a friend or a foe?
Both. The miseducation the large companies are putting out there about 5Gs hurts us, because 5G is not going to help anybody in a rural area. 5G can only go a certain distance, and I think they're also advertising that it can be home service. I mean, you're going to have issues with 5G just going through walls in certain scenarios, and providing the type of latency and speeds that you can get. So that's the no part of it. The yes part of it that it's really helping us is the 5G aspects is going to be what's needed for the fastest smart city applications to work on. So we have to have that capacity. And I think 5G needs to be focused on better cellular service and smart city applications, and fiber to the home and fiber to the business. You can't beat the speed of light and proper connectivity.
And another quick question, get your feedback on it. And my favorite thing that is coming into my ecosystem is a car that I'm going to buy called the F-150 Lightning, which I'm going to charge at home for free at the university. And then we're going to run my house for free and never pay electricity again at home. Can I submit to you that you should buy a fleet of F-150s to be your backup generators and your towers and all that?
So it's funny you said that, because we just before this call, and I left a Ford place where I was just looking at that truck, and we bought another F-150 though for our fleet, for our construction crews. But yeah, I think there's some interesting things there too. I really like the truck too. I'm usually a Chevy guy, but Chevy's taking too long on their electric stuff.
Yeah,
that F-150 need to produce. They need to sponsor this program. You're going to sell more F-150s.
They do.
You're going to sell more F-150s than broadband. I can tell you that right now.
It looks
All
good.
right, Brian, I appreciate you being with us today. Give us a sense for where is LIT going to be 12 months from now? 10 counties, 10 cities, 100 cities. What's your take?
A year from now, we'll be providing services live in Brownsville and York County. We'll be expanding. We're actually have a partnership with Lorain Medina Rural Electric Co-op, and we want to continue going west from Medina County where it gets even more rural. But we're trying to work with LMRE, who again, they're ahead of the game from what they want to do, potentially partnering with 8 additional co-ops going that way. I want us to make sure we don't overcommit, and so from that side, we want to help every community we work with, but the markets that we're going to go into, we're going to be very selective. You obviously hear our business model is a little bit different. We want to work with the communities that want to work with us, but in 12 months, I see us in new markets, getting started up, just like we're starting in Brownsville and New York right now. But in 12 months, all the markets that we are starting now will have connectivity. And I think we'll be able to show that we can provide connectivity faster than most ISPs in the country. So I'm not worried about 12 months. The next 5 years, let's talk about, then we'll have smart city applications in place. We'll be in about 10 different cities. Now we'll be having fun then.
There you go. There you go. Gentlemen, final thoughts for Brian?
Brian, I think you're sitting at the very, very pinnacle of what will make the business model happen in the future. I think as we go to a place where the new geography is no geography, that is, it doesn't matter where you are, we're going to have to develop lots of more places where people can do business. And quite frankly, we're going to have to teach people how to goof off again, since we do not have the different kinds of ways that we usually get together. So you're right at the pinnacle of what we need, and good luck with your company.
Thank you.
Well, good luck to you, and very interesting. I would like to talk to you in a year and see what the impact, because it'll be about 6 months before we see what's really going to happen with the IRA money. But the huge effort in the IRA to rural broadband is one of the planks of the IRA, and I'll be interested in how you interact with that and how it benefits your business, as I suspect it will enormously.
Yeah, I agree. I will be interested as in a year from now, look back at where we're at, but I think, the money getting spent, that's really when it's going to start kicking into gear for outside. Now, the markets that we're working in, I mean, we're already seeing differences. Like we have a 11% take rate in neighborhoods before we even start building in them. And it's, we're 6 months faster than any ISP in connecting service and getting people signed up. So I want to see that improve and get better though.
I'm also glad of what you said about 5G, which is being terribly oversold for the wrong purposes. It's being advertised to and very destructively because people think it can do things it won't do and don't comprehend what it can do, which is quite substantial. Thank you.
There is no nationwide 5G. Every company that's saying that there is no nationwide 5G.
Also, there are no F-150 Lightning pickup trucks being driven around. It's an advertising chimera designed to take in naive people like Andres.
Wait a minute. He just came from a dealership that is selling them.
Ford has his money, but he doesn't have his truck.
I don't know. There's only one there, Andres. They might have just been teasing us and just saying like we're just showing it and might not really be selling it. Like it's.
Well, I sign me up. I'll buy it when it's ready. So I appreciate you all listening today and watching. And unfortunately, we could be here for hours. We want Brian to come back maybe every 6 to 12 months to give us a check on his success. I hope he goes to build a huge unicorn and have a IPO day on the NASDAQ Stock Exchange. We should all be there with some bubbly. Thank you, Brian. John, will you take us away?
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
I got a wife. I got a family. Make my living with my hands. We're rolling a steel mill downtown Birmingham. Birmingham, the greatest city in Alabama. You can travel across this entire land. There ain't no place like Birmingham.
All right.
Johnny, you know how to play your guest, my friend. You know how to play your guest. I love it. That's awesome.
That's been wonderful.